Seahawks fans, wherever you may be. Welcome back for another edition of the Seahawks Playbook Podcast. Join your host, Bill Alvstad, and co-host, sports writer and football analyst Keith Myers, as we talk Seahawks football. Hey Seahawks fans, welcome back to another edition of the Seahawks Playbook Podcast. I'm your host, Bill Alvstad, sitting down with Keith Myers. Welcome in, Keith.
Hey, Bill. So, rookie minicamp was this last weekend. So, early chance to get a look at some of these guys that got drafted, all of the guys that were signed as undrafted free agents, and a few tryout guys. A lot of normalcy. It very much felt like a normal rookie
That's a good takeaway.
Minicamp, and not something like the last 2 years where COVID has been kind of screwing with everything. This one felt just like normal.
Yeah,
which is good.
Yeah, no, you're right. And they had, in addition to the 14 undrafted free agents and the 4 or 5 invites for tryouts guys in, they did have quite a few of their rookies they drafted in the 2022 NFL draft. A week and a half ago at this point now. Mm-hmm. And also they had a few of their players, second-year players, come back and participate in this thing, including Aaron Fuller, Cade Johnson, Pierre-Olivier Lestage. Every time I get a chance, I like to say his name. Miles Adams. Aaron Donker was out there doing walk-arounds, although he wasn't full participant because of his ACL that he had. Liakim Williams and Alex Changum were there as well. So I'd throw that in there before we start talking. So let's start with the draft picks, Keith. I think that that's, well, first of all, I think something to explain to people about the mini camp. It's not really a practice. It's only really kind of a walkthrough. It's where the team, it's basically this. It's where the team gets a chance to show these guys the culture for the first time, what the team's all about, what the expectations are, meet the coaches, start to dig into the playbook a little bit, get a feel, meet your fellow rookies and second-year guys, and kind of build that camaraderie a little bit. And it gives the chance for the coaches to really just see the players for the first time in person, all together as a group, how everything's kind of meshing together. There's some projection there as far as a couple of these guys, and we'll talk about that. I think Pete talked about the tackles more than any other position group out there, and then maybe Kenneth or Ken Walker. So there's a few things to talk about in and around the mini camp, and then maybe we can talk about a little bit how they might fit into the existing roster and kind of piece that together a little bit before the Seahawks move on to the May 23rd organized team activity.
Yeah, so looking at all of this, one of the big things that they do here is that they install certain parts of the playbook, and so they actually are, they call it installation, and it's just about getting guys up to speed, saying, "Hey, these are our plays. This is how our terminology. This is how we do stuff." As far as that, and it's about getting certain guys a chance for that learning to begin, not just looking at the playbook and memorizing that stuff, but actually what it feels like to be out on the field running those plays, and what's expected of them. And that is what the Seahawks were able to do here, and especially like you brought up the tackles. It looks very much right now like both offensive tackles that were drafted, Cross and Lucas, are going to be the starters.
It looks that way. That's what I got out of this whole thing.
Yeah, and so they're going to start 2 rookie offensive tackles,
which is crazy. I didn't think it was possible. But Keith, what do you think about that?
I can't think of a time I've ever seen a team go into a year with the idea that they're going to start 2 rookie offensive tackles. Like any team in the NFL, I cannot think of a year where that was the plan for any team, and so it's definitely interesting. But it's also the quickest way to get these 2 guys up to the point where they believe the team will be ready to compete with them. You got to get them out there. You got to let them take their lumps and that kind of stuff, so that way they can get the reps and they can learn. And you don't do that sitting them on the bench. And they're not trying to, they're going to try and compete. But the most important thing this year isn't wins and losses. It's getting all these rookies up to speed so they can be competitive a year from now and be challenging for playoff spots and, maybe making a run if things line up. And so you've got to get the guys out there. And playing.
At Pete Carroll's press conference, he was asked, what stood out to you, and he immediately went to the tackles jumped out right off the bat, and then basically in unison, he just mentioned Cross and Lucas together as being kind of one thing, and then he talked about the attributes, the quickness, the athleticism, all that kind of stuff, the excitement, the competition, quote unquote. He talked about Forsyth, obviously, and Curran. As guys that would compete. But I think you read it the same way I read it, was that those guys are almost an afterthought in competing for more of a backup role. I just got the fact that these guys were almost installed already as tackle 1, tackle 2, and then the backups. Yeah. And I found that pretty exciting, only because we already know that Cross was going to be in at left tackle. To see that they value, and after looking at Abraham Lucas in person, Abe Lucas, he wants to go by Abe, in person, and seeing those guys together and viewing them as their bookends from now until you can't see out any further is exciting to me. I know that it's painful. I know there's going to be a few lumps, but there's going to be more positives than negatives.
Oh, yeah. Well, and the thing is that one of the things Pete Carroll talked about is that these guys move so well, that their feet are quick. They move like guys that are half their size in terms of their ability to match speed rushers and move in the running game and get to their spot and that kind of stuff. And it's an athleticism that they haven't had at offensive tackle that Pete Carroll's excited about. And that honestly, Stone Forsyth and Jake Curran are both good prospects, and we saw some really good things out of Curran last year since he got a chance to play, but neither of them have the ceiling of Lucas and Cross. Both those guys have Pro Bowl potential, where I don't think Forsyth and Curran do. So rather than develop by getting them out there and playing the two guys that are going to be middle of the pack at best, they want to get the guys out there that are going to be Pro Bowlers at best and get them experience. And that's an important part of this.
I do think that Jake Curran could offer some competition there, some real competition. I think he's got the motivation. He started the last 5 games. He didn't look really horrible. He's improved, I think, probably, assuming, in the offseason as far as strength and just conditioning and mindset. I think the mindset part of it is probably the aspect that we kind of undervalue sometimes, because we're just seeing the play on the field, but he's doing the work. He's got the mindset that he wants to go take that job. So I think it'll be a real competition at the right tackle spot. I do think, though, that the team values getting both tackles started at the same time on the same journey together. It's just it's that team camaraderie thing. I think they want to bring those guys together and kind of have that nucleus. And then you add the new offensive tackle likely in Austin Blythe. We've got 3 new starters on the offensive line.
You mean center?
Center. I'm sorry.
You said tackle.
The other thing that I was going to say too is it seems like the script is flipped a little bit as far as the strength on the offensive line with these 2 draft picks now. In prior years, it's been the offensive guards that have kind of been the nucleus of the interior of the offensive line, and you had Dwayne Brown, but then on the other side it was a little bit weaker. And then now it seems like the offensive guards, we've got the 2 starters still, and after that it's a little wishy-washy, and now we've got really 4 offensive tackles on the team, I think for the first time in a long time, where there's a little bit of confidence there that at least 3 of those guys are starter caliber guys that could come in right away and play.
Yeah, I mean, they do look like they're going to have 3 new starters on the offensive line, which we said they needed, but also said they probably weren't willing to get 3 in the same offseason, because that's hard, and continuity is a big thing on the offensive line. We didn't think they would commit to doing that, but it does appear that with Blythe and the two rookies, they're going to have 3 new starters. And honestly, I'm not sad about it. So
how do you see the offensive line then shape up? So you think it's Cross, Lewis, Blythe,
Jackson, and then
and Lucas.
Wow. So and that's just the way that I see that working. I mean, think about that. 3 of those guys are young. We have 2 rookies and a guy in his 3rd year on that line. This could be the line for a long time, and that's very interesting because turnover has been the thing since Pete Carroll got here. Just the offensive line turnover has been crazy.
Just looking ahead, just briefly, 2023 though could see a likely change at center and left or right guard. So you might have 2 additional starters next year, possibly. But then that group would move together as a unit, possibly, through a couple of contracts. So that would be fun.
So the other thing that from this minicamp is a guy, a guard, Gilmore, out of Georgia State. He's 6'1", which is short, 302 pounds, but he is a plus athlete for the position. Moves really well, natural leverage, getting underneath, and the team really liked what they saw in him because he's got that lateral quickness and the run blocking and all those kind of things. So he might be a guy to watch for. He kind of reminds me of Phil Haynes, except for Phil Haynes couldn't stay healthy.
Yeah. Well, and in fact, Phil Haynes and him are coming back to compete at the guard spot. I mean, Pete Carroll mentioned Phil Haynes and this guy's name out loud at the conference as heading into the competition. And the reason that he liked this undrafted guy that you mentioned, Shamarius Gilmore, he's got 51 starts. So he's got all that experience. He comes right in. I think Pete feels like that's one of the guys out of the undrafted camp here that's going to be able to actually have a chance at the roster. Yeah, you're right.
So here's one of the, over 4,000 snaps played in college. And here's the thing, his short shuttle was a 4.39.
Which is just a little bit slower than new draft pick Kobe Bryant, a cornerback.
Yeah. I mean, and that'll tell you his lateral agility is scary good because, I mean, that puts him in cornerback, defensive back, safety range in terms of that number. And this guy weighs 302 pounds. So,
Is he 302 pounds?
Yeah, 6'1" and 302.
That seems light for a guard.
Still, he's 6'1". So it's all about, for him, it's going to be about leverage. He's going to be able to get underneath the pads of anybody. The question is, can he hold up, and not get out muscled? And so, he's quick enough. He's got the leverage, but then it's, can he not get out muscled? And is he long enough? Does he have the length to get in and not be just pushed backwards?
And right now, .com has at guard in backup positions as Phil Haynes and Pierre-Olivier Lestage. So his competition there, he's got a shot.
Yep.
Pete also mentioned 2 draft picks by name coming out now. Smith, our other draft pick on the at the edge position, had an undisclosed injury, but he was really high on Boye Mafe. He said he was like molded clay. He could he came in raw, but he's got so much upside. They feel like they're going to use him out of the gate as a situational pass rusher, hopefully develop him as an outside linebacker.
Yeah. I mean, they know what he can, they know he can get upfield and get after the quarterback, but they want him to be able to do more. But he is super athletic and super coachable, willing to try anything they ask him to do, listen, they like what they've got in him, and not just the athlete, but in the person. And they're going to, start him as that situational pass rusher and slowly add to his responsibilities. They want him to be a starting outside linebacker. And I think given the time and the development, he will be there, and sooner than most people probably think.
I think so. Yeah, that's exciting. That's exciting. And
It's
Ken
very
Walker, previously known as Kenneth Walker the third, now Ken Walker, looks like this is going to be a guy that's going to do it all. I mean, even Schneider came out and said, he didn't receive the ball much out of the backfield in college. That was just their scheme. We envision him to be able to do everything here.
Yeah, and he showed in camp, nice like hands and the ability to, secure the ball and get upfield quickly and make it so it's hard on those linebackers. As he gets the ball out of the backfield, he is an explosive guy. He is a guy. Seahawk fans are going to like him. I know that there's a lot of hatred because he was drafted in the second round, and people want to say that no running back's ever worth that high of a draft pick, but they're going to like him when they give him a chance. He's an elite guy. And I'm excited. I think the offensive line's got to be able to open up some holes, and with the rookies, and all the new starters, it may not be pretty early on, but once they start to gel, Walker's going to take off, and it's going to be real fun.
Yeah, this is one of the picks that fans love to hate when it happens, and love the pick, the player after he's on the field. And there's just going to be no denying the guy is going to be one of the best rookie running backs in the NFL in 2022. He just is. And he's going to have that opportunity here in Seattle. It's likely we're not going to have Chris Carson available. It's likely that Rashad Penny is going to have limited snaps and opportunities, and has had injuries in the past that has limited his potential. And I think Kenneth Walker is going to be able to step right in there, and he may end up being the number one starting running back for the Seattle Seahawks, before midseason.
Yeah. It did kind of come out with all of this that the team is uncertain about Chris Carson if he's ever going to play again because of the neck injury. And
we've just heard that over and over and over this offseason.
Yeah. And so he's still on the roster, and they're going to give him a chance to see if he can, pass a physical and all of that. But at this point, the team is planning and acting like Chris Carson is not on the roster anymore.
And that they're in communication. I mean, it's not like it's void of any talking or anything back and forth. They know exactly where he's at. Now, I did see, a workout video that Carson's camp put out. And, so I know that he's working out with the intention of coming back. It's not like he's sitting at home sulking, saying, I'm never going to play again. That's not where this is at. This is at the point where he's trying everything he possibly can to get physically in shape and back ready to go. He just doesn't know what the doctor's going to say yet.
Yeah, and really what it comes down to is, can he get cleared to play? And if he can't get cleared to play, the team isn't going to. He can't get out on the field and help the Seahawks, and they have to be ready to move on without him. And the way that they're acting is that they don't expect him to play. That's why they drafted a running back that high, and why they paid Rashad Penny that much. Because it felt like they overspent in order to keep Penny around, and then they drafted a running back high. They got the second running back off the board, and only a few picks after the first one went off the board. And they knew they needed a guy that could be a option 1A. And if they believed in Penny, they wouldn't have done it so soon.
The best case scenario for Seattle is all three are able to go. And that's a good problem to have. And we'll just figure it out, Yep. Maybe one of them gets traded midseason before the trade deadline. Who knows? I don't know. I'm just saying that given
Carson and Penny, you go in with all three of them, knowing that one of them is going to get hurt early. But ultimately, Keith, in any game, you give all three guys some carries early on, and then you just ride the hot hand, right? Yeah. Who's having the best day?
Perfect. Okay. A couple more undrafted guys. I think you mentioned one earlier in the guard, Gilmore. So, but they really liked linebacker Vi Jones, one of the undrafted players, to make a good first impression with Pete. You mentioned him. Said he looks the part, very athletic, quick. He's got the background, which means he's had, I think dad and a couple cousins in the NFL. So he's got that going for him. And he's a guy that he feels like he can come in and compete right away for at least a spot on the special teams unit, which is where he would have to find his way.
Mm-hmm.
What else? Keith?
Who is the safety out of Idaho? I'm trying to look for his name again.
Give me a second here.
Is in my
Deadman.
Yeah, Tyrese Deadman. That the Seahawks liked him. They thought he was a tryout player. He had a couple, had a standout day at practice, and the team is trying to figure out how to get him on the 90-man roster. So, in fact, they mentioned that they're signing him, but they haven't released anyone yet, so it's not an official move. But they liked what they saw from him, and that's always interesting. Tariq Woolen, the super freak athlete, cornerback, 5th-round pick, did not participate in the first 2 days of minicamp because he's had a tight hamstring, and so the team was holding him out. But he was out there watching, learning, asking questions. The team was really impressed with his. He didn't just stand there and watch because he couldn't play. He wanted to be a part of things, wanted to learn, was there with the coaches working on, where to place his hands on the jam and how they want him to move his feet with the kick step. And even though he couldn't get out there and run, he was still there learning and working. And that was something that really impressed the team to the point where, between those two and then Kobe Bryant, who looked natural and just smooth out there in the defense, Pete Carroll was really happy with the defensive backs. And he thinks that coming into the offseason, it was like the big question mark was what they were going to do at the whole defensive backfield. But now he feels like it could be a strength because he's got a lot of players that he likes, and he thinks that they're all coachable and trainable, and they're going to get a lot out of these guys, even if they're not household names.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty happy with the room. You've got Trey Brown, Artie Burns, Sidney Jones, Niall Warrior, which I believe they cut. John Reed, Mike Jackson, Kobe Bryant, Tariq Woolen, Justin Coleman. That's not a bad room. When you add that to the safety room that we've currently got, the back end in this defense, I think, is greatly improved from a year prior. There's going to need a little bit of reps to get it all together.
Because in the listed at safety, like guys that you didn't mention, would be Diggs and Adams at safety, but then also Blair and Amadi, who are listed at safety, even though they both play, nickel corner.
And Ryan Neal.
And, Ryan Neal, who's been so versatile and such a good guy.
Can you imagine Ryan Neal with the new coaches, Sean Desai and Carl Scott? To me, you have to add, and I think Pete Carroll alluded to this in his press conference. He even mentioned the defensive backs coaches by name in his press conference, calling them out for just like the difference that it's already made in coaching and the way that things are presented. Hands-on approach. Sean Desai, Carl Scott came over this last offseason with new defensive coordinator Clint Hurt, part of that team, and I'm excited. Like, this is one of the position groups on the team that I'm going to be most watching during training camp, because it's imperative that these guys try to come together before the season. And it's a new defensive scheme. It's going to be new terminology, new defensive scheme.
Yeah, new assignments. You look at the fact that they're going to more of a 3-4 means that what you're asking your defensive ends to do is different. They're lining up in different gaps. They're two-gapping at times instead of just trying to get into a gap and stay there. You've got linebackers that have different responsibilities, because now they've got to fill multiple gaps, and they've got to be able to slide and work with the guys around them. And it's a very different it's a different scheme, and it's just because all those things are different. I'm excited to see what this is going to be. And honestly, this team needed a change. They needed to evolve, and the scheme that won this team a Super Bowl had started to become stale, and they needed new eyes. They needed new ideas. And credit Pete Carroll for recognizing that his defense had become stale and going out and getting guys to come in and bring new ideas and new concepts and just change. Pete Carroll's willingness to adapt and become more innovative with his defense is huge. I mean, the guy's in his 70s and he's willing to do that. I think that's phenomenal.
I think also giving existing guys that have been on the roster, a new opportunity to show out. And we all talked about the way that Ken Norton and company had a difficult time putting players in the best position to be successful. And this, to me, is the most optimistic thing that can happen, is a new set of eyes all the way around. Everything gets thrown out the window. You start fresh. That means all the players get a chance to start fresh too. So you get a guy like Alton Robinson, who's got all the talent in the world, and he's just been waiting, and he's been sitting back because you want to get Benson Mayowa on the field. Now those players are cleared out. Alton Robinson's got a clear path now to at least compete. Mm-hmm. With Boye Mafe and some of those other guys. And I just think it's a great opportunity for guys to be able to show and come out and maybe get a new look that they just didn't have in the past. So,
yeah, I mean, and there was honestly, this is, if those of you that are watching the YouTube feed here, as soon as he mentioned, putting guys in position, I rolled my eyes pretty hard, and I didn't realize I was doing it. Then I'm like, oh yeah, that's probably that might be a great look. But it comes down to, I mean, that was a great example with Robinson. Robinson is a young, athletic guy, and just good things happened when he was on the field. But they kept pulling him off, and he'd only get a few snaps here or there because Benson Mayowa, they wanted to get him on the field. So why? Because they're paying him more? He's not the better player. He was never the better player. And so those kind of things didn't make sense. And then you looked at the way they used Jamal Adams as a deep guy instead of getting him up in the box, and they weren't using the players in the way that they could get the most out of them, and it was so frustrating. And I look at this new coaching staff, and coming in, that's what all of them were talking about, was like, you have these athletes, let them do what they do best, build around that, and I am excited. I really am. I think this coaching staff's going to be good.
I'm excited because you add everyone we've just been talking about. So you look at the defensive roster, and then you look at the coaching and the opportunities there. This defense is going to be underrated. Now, to me, this defense, if you just have look at the defense, to me, this is a top 15 defense easy, and I could make an argument based on improvements that we are likely to see that this could be a, say, top 10-ish defense. So you take that and you just set it aside, and you go to the offense, and you look at all the position groups, the running back room, the wide receivers, the tight ends with Noah Fant and Will Disley and Colby Parkinson with the upside there. Now our two tackles that have Pro Bowl potential, Austin Blythe, who ran that Rams offense very effectively for a few years before last year. And you just kind of add that all together. And the only piece of ingredient right now holding back the offense is the quarterback. And if you can get decent point guard level play that kind of Pete Carroll is looking for out of either Drew Lock or Geno Smith, you could end up winning more games than I think that people are talking about right now. So if people are saying 4 or 5 wins right now, I think that there's a possibility that there could be 7 to 9 wins with this roster.
See, and I'm not going to join you on that, because I do think that the quarterback play will always hold this team back. And while there's so much to like about where things have gone on the offensive line, those 2 rookies are going to play like rookies. It's going to be ugly at times, and it'll be good at times, and you'll see glimpses of what's to come, and it'll be fun. And you'll be like, wow, look at that. But there'll be other times when it just looks pathetic. And I expect this to offense to have problems and stall out and struggle. And it's
I think you mentioned that's the key word right there. Stall out.
Yeah.
That's what happens when you don't have a quarterback that's able to get the ball consistently to Tyler Lockett, to DK Metcalf, to Noah Fant, to the playmakers, running backs out of the backfield. And you have instances of where your tackles are making mistakes and kill drives because the quarterback took a sack or whatever. So I get what you're saying. I know exactly what you're saying. I'm just looking at upside, but the downside is there as well. It's just right on the surface. It's like obvious. If Drew Lock and Geno Smith just have average years based on their own averages, it's going to be a long year.
And I think that you look at the defensive backs, like, okay, the safeties are there, but the cornerbacks, Bryant and Woolen, and then they've got to get Brown back from injury. Like, there's going to be some learning curves and growing pains there. At the line, they don't really have a penetrating defensive tackle yet.
It's one of the weak spots here on the roster.
Their outside linebackers are all young and learning the position because they were defensive ends before, and now they've got to be 3-4 outside linebackers, and they need another inside linebacker because I don't think that you win a championship with Cody Barton as a starting interior linebacker. So the defensive roster isn't done. There are some great pieces, but they've got to learn and develop. And that's only going to happen once the season begins. They need to improve over the course of the season. And I think that we're looking at that. They need another offseason to finish retooling the roster. So I don't want everyone to get their hopes up because you and I are being really positive. I think there's so much to love here. I just expect them, they're a year away. They just are. They need all of these young players to develop and grow and learn. And a year from now, when they've filled in the last couple pieces of the roster and hopefully found a quarterback that isn't terrible, this team will be ready to win.
Cool.
To me, this is, if you go back, the roster right now is 2011. Okay. Slightly better version of 2011, I think. No, I think it's 2011 because it's right. That was a team that was led by Tavares Jackson and struggled offensively at times, including the 6-3 loss to Cleveland. But that was the Tavares Jackson year. Then they got their rookie quarterback and the last couple pieces to the puzzle. And 2012, everything took off. And they were 36 seconds away from beating Atlanta in the playoffs and making the NFC title game. And they came back the year after that and won the whole dang thing. And really, that's where I see this team. It's bad quarterback play, not going to be a good end of the year, but the roster is coming around. It's developing quickly, and they're poised to be where they want to be a year from now. And that's a team that can go deep into the playoffs.
So speaking of the roster, the next several shows over the next 6 weeks, we'll probably focus on the roster. We're going to be talking about position groups, where we're standing out with strength, where our weaknesses are. We're going to find out where we stand on all that stuff. So by the time we get to camp, we're really well versed in who we've got, what we're looking for, and then by the 1st of September or so, we'll have a prediction show. So we'll go from here, where everything's just hunky dory. We'll drill down and we'll see where we're at after we really get into the weeds on this stuff. So anything else, Keith? We'll get out of here.
No, let's go ahead and get out of here. The one thing that I'm excited to get into those shows about and really do the research for is to look at just how deep this team is, because there's some places where depth was a massive concern a week ago, and I'm feeling a little bit better now. So that's interesting. So once we get into it, and because I haven't dug into the depth that deeply, but I'm very interested to figure out where that goes.
Depth that deeply. Yes, indeed, Keith. Yes, indeed. Let's get out of here. Find Keith on Twitter at Myers NFL. I'm at NW Seahawk. You can find the show at your favorite podcast platforms and YouTube. Make sure you hit the subscribe button. Until next time, go Hawks.
Go Hawks.
Seahawks Playbook Podcast listeners, thanks for joining us for another edition of the show. You can find us on Twitter. Bill is at NW Seahawk. Keith is at Myers NFL. And the show is at Hawks Playbook. You can listen and subscribe to the show at SeahawksPlaybook.com.